Ready? This hearing will come to order. Good afternoon and welcome to today's hearing entitled Federal STEM Education Programs. I personally want to thank everyone for coming here today. It's a nice audience for the proceedings of the Subcommittee on Research and Science Education. This hearing is part of an ongoing assessment that the committee is undertaking to determine the role of the federal government in science, technology, engineering, and math education. We'll be hearing today from 4 federal agencies about their progress improving STEM programs. As a mathematician and someone who believes strongly in the need to expand educational opportunities for the next generation, today's hearing holds particular importance for me. In the past few months, this committee has done a commendable job in drawing attention to the difficulties that our country will face if we are unable to increase the number of future scientists and researchers. From the difficult but not unsurmountable challenges laid out in the National Academy's Rising Above the Gathering Storm report to witness testimony from businesses and universities, we've heard time and again that we need more STEM education graduates and teachers if we are to compete successfully in the global economy. This committee, under the leadership of Chairman Gordon, has succeeded in passing legislation that will pay significant future dividends and will be a great legacy for this Congress. The issues we're discussing today are no less important. By hearing from educators on the front lines of the educational system as well as the federal agencies that must implement STEM programs, we're laying out the groundwork for how to maximize the benefits of existing programs, which will invariably lead to future initiatives. Last month, the subcommittee held a hearing with local STEM educators to learn their perspectives on federal programs. During witness questioning, I made a point to highlight what I believe to be one of the most important aspects of any discussion on STEM education, and that is how we can reach more students and make sure that the United States is not only keeping up with the rest of the world, but is outpacing other countries. It's hard work to earn a degree in math or physics, as our ranking member might testify, and we need to make sure that our federal policies first and foremost benefit our students. Our previous witnesses shared with us their recommendation for STEM education improvements that included working with states and districts to align federal programs to local standards. The witnesses also expressed frustration that there are currently no consistent guidelines for evaluating STEM programs across government agencies. And we have asked today's witnesses to respond to the comments and recommendations from the previous panel. In addition, the week before last month's hearing, the Academic Competitiveness Council released a comprehensive report on federal STEM education programs. Not surprisingly, the ACC assessment was the same as that of our witnesses. Collaboration between agencies and with state and local governments needs improvement. Programs should be designed around best practices, and a wide variety of educational measurements should be simplified into common ones. Each of the agencies invited to testify this afternoon were deeply involved in the ACC's process, and we have asked each of them to communicate today what changes they have made over the past year in order to achieve these goals. I'm hopeful that today's witnesses will shed some light on how we've been spending scarce federal dollars on STEM education and how we can improve our current practices so that we're benefiting students from kindergarten all the way up. I look forward to the discussion with our witnesses and how their agencies are planning, coordinating, and evaluating their efforts to improve STEM education. The chair now recognizes Dr. Ehlers for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be here to participate in yet another event centered on STEM education. You and I think, have both spent a good part of our lives dedicated to education, particularly science, technology, engineering, and math education. I do have to clarify that what the STM and E stand for, even though everyone here should be familiar with it, but I have to do that for anyone who isn't familiar because tomorrow we are going to have debate, discussion, and votes on 2 stem cell bills. And so all the papers are going to talk about for the next few days is votes on stem cell bills. We're not talking about a stem cell bill here today. In fact, I think this is for the future of our nation, probably considerably more interesting. STEM education is a priority for this nation. It has to be. If our nation is to survive, to continue to improve in the welfare of its own citizens, and frankly also in the welfare of the world. Thanks to a constantly increasing understanding of the importance of STEM education to our national competitiveness, I know I no longer have to go into a lot of details on this. But even with this improving awareness of STEM education, there's still more that the federal government can do to improve K-12 STEM education excuse me, in the United States. And we clearly need improvement because we are still ranked near the bottom of the developed countries in STEM education. The Academic Competitiveness Council was created by Congress to catalog and coordinate the STEM education projects and programs currently supported by the federal government. I commend the agencies that participated in this endeavor. For some time, I've been very concerned about the fact that the federal government and its agencies, and also some private entrepreneurs in industry, are developing these fantastically good programs, but there's no overall correlation of how they should be used in the classroom, how they fit in with the curriculum, and I think we should be working on that. I commend the agencies that have participated in this endeavor. The charge to the Academic Competitiveness Council was a challenging one, and the report reflects the breadth and depth of programs that exist at our federal agencies. From the start, I harbored a general concern that the ACC might overzealously seek out seemingly duplicative programs and inadvertently encourage their demise, which happened a few years ago with math science partnerships. Someone in the basement of the White House noticed that we had 2 math science partnerships, one in the National Science Foundation, one in the Department of Education, and said, aha, duplication, we must get rid of one. Fortunately, this has not happened in your case on these issues. I think the ACC report sheds light on the diversity and uniqueness of the programs that are developed and sends a clear message that Congress must authorize adequate evaluation capacity for federal STEM education programs. It is crucial that we evaluate these programs with the most appropriate and rigorous techniques available. Overall, the ACC report provides a useful foundation for future coordination and collaboration so that federal agencies can work together to leverage STEM resources and communicate successes as well as failures. I am pleased that the recently reestablished National Science and Technology Council Subcommittee on Education and Workforce Development will follow through on actions recommended by the ACC. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today about how they are moving towards increasing collaboration as well as becoming more educated about the STEM education programs at their respective agencies. With that, I yield back to the balance of my time.
Thank you, the Chair. Thanks to the gentleman from Michigan. If there are any members, I don't see any here, but if there are any members who wish to submit additional opening statements, your statements will be added to the record at this point. At this time, I would like to introduce our distinguished witnesses. First, we have Dr. Cora Marrett. Is that being pronounced correctly? She's the Assistant Director for the National Science Foundation Directorate for Education and Human Resources. Dr. Marrett is also the co-chair of the Education and Workforce Development Subcommittee under the NSTC. Welcome aboard, Dr. Marrett, and she's going to be chairing the new subcommittee, so it's a big burden on your shoulders, and I'm looking forward to your words. Our second panelist is Dr. Joyce Winterton. She's the Assistant Administrator of the NASA's Office of Education. Welcome. Third, we have Dr. Bill Valdez, a Director of Office for Workforce Development and Teachers and a scientist at the Department of Energy. Welcome this afternoon. And finally, we have Dr. Bruce Fuchs, and he's the director of the Office of Science Education at the National Institute of Health. Welcome all, and as our witnesses know, spoken testimony is limited to 5 minutes each, after which each member of the committee will have 5 minutes to ask questions. We will try and limit you to 5 minutes, but I understand if you have a few extra minutes to run over, but we do want to keep things in line. So we will start with Dr. Marrett. At this point, would you begin your testimony?
Thank you very much, Chairman McNerney and Ranking Member Ehlers. I do appreciate the opportunity today and want to express my gratitude to the entire subcommittee for your long-standing support for excellence in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, education, or STEM. The National Science Foundation appreciates the interest expressed by this subcommittee and others in coordination and evaluation of STEM-centered activities. In fact, the National Science Foundation, or NSF, takes pride in the actions we've undertaken over the years to enhance excellence across all levels of education and all fields of science and engineering. We owe our successes to the interactions we've had with communities of researchers, educators, diverse organizations, and indeed other agencies. Those interactions have shaped significantly the content of our efforts, our evaluation of them, and our dissemination strategies. We are aware, however, that we must revisit continually the approaches and connections we cultivate. These are some of the ways in which we're looking at what is the current situation and how must we respond to the challenges that now exist. The reconstitution of the Subcommittee on Education and Workforce Development of the National Science and Technology Council, to which you've just referred, that reconstitution should help us in NSF strengthen our ties to other federal agencies. I should note we already have a number of ties. One of our most recent is a partnership through a Memorandum of Understanding with NASA. And I am delighted that Dr. Winterton and I had an opportunity quite recently to host a conference in which we had participation from our other colleagues here at the table and other agencies. The subcommittee, the reconstituted subcommittee of the NSTC, the membership for it will come from the agencies represented on NSTC's larger Committee on Science. The representatives are to possess substantive knowledge of their STEM education portfolio within the agency. And these representatives are to have experience with evaluation research and possibly with the development and application of performance measures. So in looking at what we need for that committee, we realize it's knowledge both of what agencies are doing, but familiarity to work on these very important issues of evaluation research, performance measures. The subcommittee that I'm referring to will address a broad range of issues related to STEM education. To use a phrase that's often heard these days, this will be attending from K to gray, because the education portfolio does indeed cover all phases of education and workforce activities. The subcommittee will provide a forum for exchanges of information and expertise regarding research and evaluation. On the one side, then, we have the development, the reconstitution of the Subcommittee on Education and Workforce Development. Another important development, of course, is the report you referred to from the Academic Competitiveness Council, or the ACC. As we look at the report, it certainly serves to enhance our attention to evaluation. Now, within the National Science Foundation, there has been a requirement that there is evaluation associated with every program within the Directorate of Education and Human Resources. In fact, Congress had a lot to do with the directive that said this is expected. We've responded and indeed now have a requirement that all such programs within this part of the organization do have to be subject to evaluation. But we have other work to do, and we see ourselves as attending increasingly to such matters as clarifying the objectives of particular programs. Evaluation must depend on how clear is the intent of any activity. We see ourselves as attending far more perhaps to the definition of concepts and ensuring that those definitions are shared, especially with the other agencies that must be involved. These become fundamental issues to ensure that we will be able to conduct the rigorous evaluations that we agree must be essential for determining how resources are being used. In collaboration with others, we will strive to enhance the capacity for and knowledge base of such evaluation. There is a need for expanding the community, the experts who can in fact bring to the matter of evaluation and research the strong conceptual, theoretical work that's essential. There are, in addition to these matters of evaluation, there are extensive possibilities for expanded opportunities to improve STEM education, opportunities for engaging with others on research, for example. The hearing that you had with STEM educators, the inquiries we have received from foundations, lots of private foundations, industrial groups, the responsiveness we have received from school districts and higher education associations, all of these developments prompt our heightened attention and commitment to collaboration, collaboration in the cause of excellence. In closing then, we at the National Science Foundation will not rest on our past achievements. Rather, we will continue to foster and tap the creativity this nation needs for the success of our citizenry in the years ahead. I'm willing, of course, to respond to questions. This could be nothing more than a quick snapshot of what we have in mind, what we have done, and where we intend to go at the National Science Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Marrett. Now we'll recognize Dr. Winterton.
Thank you, Chairman McNerney and Congressman Ehlers. Appreciate the opportunity to testify today and have a discussion that we know is so important around STEM education. NASA certainly recognizes the role that education has in providing that next generation of scientists, engineers, and people that are expert in technology that will really advance the nation's economic well-being. The United States thus has a tremendous need to sustain our competitive international collaborations, and we want to keep United States preeminence in that area. NASA certainly serves as a contributor towards that goal. As was mentioned by Dr. Marrett, we have a growing number of agency collaborations, our Memorandum of Understanding with the National Science Foundation. Also, we recently signed a Memorandum of Understanding with the Federal Aviation Administration. So it was very rewarding as we signed that to see a group of middle school students experiencing our Smart Skies initiative that's a simulated online resource where students get a feeling of what it's like to actually land a sequence of planes safely using mathematics as part of that learning. And it was very interesting to see their motivation of seeing the real world context and how you apply your math in a type of job that is in demand. I do serve on the interagency task force to revitalize the aerospace workforce that has been mandated by Congress. And to that, we're collaborating with the U.S. Department of Labor, NSF, NIH, Department of Energy, Department of Defense, and looking forward to a substantial look at where we are currently since the gathering storm and what needs to be done to re-energize and make sure we're on target with those. We certainly look at how we can work with other agencies. For instance, recently at Johnson Space Center, we conducted a teacher-to-teacher training that is part of the U.S. Department of Education's initiative by professional development. I think we had over 350 teachers who signed up and participated in that effort in Texas. As our other agencies, we have a renewed effort to really look at what are vigorous metrics to evaluate the effectiveness of our program, the efficiency, but also the long-term impact. How do we know that we're really investing our dollars in the right place? So we actually have a specific schedule of how we'll be looking at each of our major programs and looking at the impact of those as well. We are looking forward to our National Academy study on our pre-college programs that will be available in November. And again, that will be another opportunity for us to see how we're doing with those programs, how we can improve, and how we're meeting our customers' needs. The role of our agency certainly includes professional development. Being a former high school teacher, that's close to my heart, and a teacher educator. And it's very important for NASA to work closely with educators as we develop resources in a formal K-12 setting, or as we work with our informal partners in museums and community-based groups like Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, 4-H. Some of the things that we're doing, for instance, with our educator astronaut who is a mission specialist and will be part of our STS-118 launch in August. We've worked with the International Technology Education Association and the National Science Teachers Education to develop resources so students can actually develop a growth chamber. They can do the engineering. Obviously, that's a skill we may need someday. Go back to the moon and beyond. Those students can use their science background, their engineering at an elementary, middle school, and high school level to develop growth chambers, and then we actually have basal seeds that will be flying on the shuttle that they can test and see if their growth chamber will actually work. So that's an example of the collaboration, making sure that we're connecting to the existing curriculum, bringing our resources that fit the standards and what teachers can afford to do, both cost-effective and time-wise, because we know that's very important in the curriculum today. Our National Explorer Schools is an example of how, over 3 years, we work with a team within a school. That's a competitive process. Those educators help us determine what are the needs in that particular school, how we can meet their needs, but also how we sustain that afterwards. In fact, at the National Science Teachers Association conference, I had a teacher who came up to me she was from Kentucky and said, I was part of an Explorer school, I'm teaching at a different school now, but I can tell you I changed the way I teach because of that experience. I'm teaching more real world using NASA content with my students today, so they see where they're going to apply their science and math. It's made such a difference in the responsiveness and interest of our students in STEM. We certainly use our digital learning network, which is an opportunity for us to connect schools to our engineers and scientists at our centers. That's really what NASA has to add, our content that's new and relevant and information that may or probably isn't in a textbook, our facilities and our experts and our people. So our digital learning networks, for instance, I saw a school from the state of Washington in a dialogue with a scientist at Johnson Space Center. So through that vehicle, we can reach every school in every state, even if they're not within a radius where they can travel to one of our NASA centers, although we certainly encourage that. We balance our portfolio looking at higher education, undergraduate, graduate, and the K-12 is really an important part of our continuum to have a pipeline to our workforce, not only for NASA, but also our contractors. And informal education is certainly a way to engage the public at large. We look forward to more opportunities to work with our counterparts in other agencies, educators, to really make sure we're on target, meeting the needs of educators and students today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Winterton. Mr. Valdez?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman and Mr. Ehlers, thank you for inviting me to testify at this important hearing. I have submitted written testimony that makes 3 points. First, federal S&T mission agencies, such as the Department of Energy, have enormous resources that could be devoted to STEM education and workforce development. Those resources naturally complement what is offered by the Department of Education and the National Science Foundation. We are developing partnerships with other federal agencies, NSF, the Department of Education, and other organizations that have a strong interest in STEM education as a way to leverage our resources within the Department of Energy. Second, the office I manage, Workforce Development for Teachers and Scientists, has a great deal of work to do in the area of program evaluation. We are in the process of developing a comprehensive and rigorous evaluation program that builds upon the recommendations of the Academic Competitiveness Council and what experts told this committee at the May 15th hearing. Third, my office is engaged in an extensive planning process that is leading to a reprioritization of our programs to meet today's challenges in STEM education and workforce development. We are now developing business plans for all of our programs that describe their goals, resource requirements, and connection to the DOE mission. These 3 points are discussed in more detail in my written testimony, and I welcome an opportunity to answer any questions you might have about them. But I would like to take a moment to discuss one of the questions that you asked in your May 29th letter of invitation to this hearing. What do you recommend is the most effective role your agency can play in improving STEM literacy? I have had literally dozens of conversations with experts in the field on this question, including most of my colleagues at this table, and just in the past 2 weeks, Frank Owens of the National Science Teachers Association, Sally Schuler of the National Science Resource Center, and Iris Weiss of Horizon Research, who testified at this hearing on May 15th. The conversations I had with these 3 experts, who I consider to be among the thought leaders in STEM education in the United States, have led me to the following observations. All 3 agreed that DOE programs, which emphasize experiential learning, hands-on opportunities for students and educators in rigorously designed programs at our national laboratories, fill a critical void in STEM education and workforce development. Iris Weiss, for example, said that DOE needs to provide an authentic research experience, well beyond the brief cookbook experience that students and educators tend to get, even at the undergraduate level. Students and educators learn by doing. We provide them with an opportunity at our national laboratories to learn with some of the best mentor scientists in the world. But, and this is a very big caution, our programs must be properly designed to maximize their effectiveness. This is why we are developing business plans for all of our programs, and will have those plans reviewed by outside experts. Our program design must be open, transparent, and conform with the best standards known to the STEM education community. Iris Weiss asked me if we really would take their suggestions and criticisms to heart, and my answer was, of course. All 3 experts were firm in their belief that we must find a way to sustain our programs and link them to what matters to educators and students. Frank Owens suggested that DOE partner with NSTA to help develop voluntary national science certification standards for educators. This would take 2 forms. First, making a structured laboratory research experience part of the voluntary national certification standards that NSTA is developing. And second, utilizing DOE's world-class scientific talent to partner with NSTA to develop their online science content modules. NSTA will propose a partnership structure to accomplish this with the Department of Energy. Iris Weiss suggested that we also work with the Council of State Science Supervisors and other groups, which we will do. Finally, every expert we have spoken with has said that we must carefully evaluate our programs. Iris Weiss and Sally Schuler, who really know this business inside and out, agree that we currently are only able to measure improvements to content knowledge and interest in pursuing a science career after participation in the kinds of experiential learning programs that we manage. But we currently cannot measure whether those increases lead to improved test scores and an ability to perform science. I am very interested in talking with NSF and my colleagues at the table and other experts about ways to fill these gaps in knowledge and improve our program evaluation. Overall, all 3 experts agreed that federal S&T agencies need to do a better job of talking with one another, sharing best practices, and leveraging resources. They expressed enormous frustration that we don't have a one-stop shopping resource for programs, evaluation techniques, and outreach. Even a simple thing, such as a common application for K-12 educators who want to enter into a research experience, would be a big help, they said. The series of hearings that this committee is holding should help in that regard. I'd like to thank you, Mr. Chairman, and other members of the committee for investing your time and energy into studying this challenge. I look forward to working with you and your staff and answering any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Valdez. Dr. Fuchs?
Thank you, Chairman McNerney and Congressman Ehlers. I want to thank you for this invitation to appear before you to discuss some of NIH's STEM programs. It's an honor for me to appear before this subcommittee that has worked so hard to improve STEM education in this nation. I will apologize for the PowerPoint. I'm an old professor, and old habits are hard to break. I'd like to briefly discuss some of the things that I believe federal agencies can do to help with STEM education in this country. First, we can partner with outside agencies and experts to design exemplary model programs for a variety of things: instructional materials, teacher professional development, and then rigorously evaluate those programs. It's not that every agency should get involved in each activity, but I think every agency can select something to do well. We need to know what works, what doesn't, and most importantly, why. This kind of in-depth design and evaluation research is unlikely to come either from states or private industry working alone. Second, I believe that the responsible federal agencies, and this is primarily NSF, Department of Education, and NIH through its National Institute on Child Health and Development, need to support high-quality, scientifically based education research. Unfortunately, we have scientific evidence to support only a small number of items related to math and science teaching that we didn't know 25 years ago. We must not be in the same situation 25 years from now. Lastly, I would like to suggest that federal scientists, because of their many interactions with students and scientists from around the world, have an important insight into what it takes to compete in today's world. This insight should be used to help define the world-class standards to which our schools must aspire. Sadly, many of our state's science and math standards cannot presently be considered to be world-class. I'd like to tell you briefly about two programs that we have at the NIH and illustrate how they are working with educators in the states. The first is a grants program known as the Science Education Partnership Award. This is a peer-reviewed program located within NIH's National Center for Research Resources. These grants are used to establish partnerships within a community to enhance the teaching of science within that community. For example, a partnership might be developed between a university and a science museum, or a university and a school district. There are currently 70 active SEPA grants in 39 states, a number of which focus on underserved populations within those communities. The second program I'd like to highlight is the NIH Curriculum Supplement Series. I must say that I agree with the testimony that you received last month relating to how difficult it is to develop high-quality instructional materials. This is a time-consuming and an expensive process. I believe that we have avoided the pitfalls described by forming appropriate partnerships. In short, we know what we know, and we know what we don't know. We have been able to combine the scientific insights of some of the world's leading scientists, people like Dr. Anthony Fauci and Dr. Francis Collins, with the professional expertise of some of the most highly respected curriculum development organizations in this country. We are currently engaged in aligning our supplements to the science, math, health, and language arts standards for each state. We have included in an online appendix a sample of alignments for a number of sample states, and I've included for committee members some examples of curriculum supplements for you to review. We believe that this project is one way that we can bring some of the excitement, hope, and promise of NIH research to schools around the nation. But they won't help if they don't get out there, so I'd like to close with a brief discussion of dissemination. We have worked very hard to let educators know about the availability of our now 16 different curriculum supplements aimed at elementary, middle, and high school. At the end of May, we had requests from more than 70,000 teachers from across the country for almost 285,000 supplement titles. In the online appendix, I've included maps showing the number and location of these requests for some sample states. I think if you, each of you would look at your home state, as I do, you can look simply from the requests and identify various towns. I don't have time to show you all these state maps, but I can give you show you a national map that gives you a sense of this. This map places one blue dot in each zip code from which we have received one or more requests for an NIH curriculum supplement. Each blue dot could represent one curriculum supplement or hundreds, but the map does give you a good sense of where the orders have come from. The next map is actually a NOAA satellite image of the U.S. at night, with light showing approximately the population distribution across the U.S. Now, if I can successfully toggle this back and forth, I'll give you some sense of how well we've done at finding people where they live and connecting them with our curriculum supplement project. Thank you very much for the opportunity to discuss a few of our STEM programs. I will be happy to answer any of the questions that the committee members might have.
Thank you, Dr. Fuchs, and I want to thank all the witnesses for making the effort. I know it's a challenge to come over here and prepare yourselves and all and sit in front of this committee, so it's very good testimony. At this point, we'll open our first round of questions, and the chair recognizes himself for approximately 5 minutes or maybe a little bit longer. I think the purpose of this hearing is really to give this committee comfort in what is about to happen in STEM education, and I see it as this committee's that's about to be formed or is already formed responsibility to make sure that this is executed in a way that does take advantage of the resources that are available. I think it's a large responsibility, so I applaud again all of you for wanting to participate. I see Dr. Marrett as the leader of this effort, rightly or wrongly, and so I'm going to be picking on you a little bit more than the others perhaps, but there's no malicious intent here. Will the subcommittee be developing a strategic plan for federal STEM education programs to help guide the priorities of the agencies? Is that something you see a part of your charter?
Yes, I do. This is an important question because we are at this point developing the charter for the committee. And as I see it, yes, there's got to be, we must undertake some activities that will strengthen, enhance what's taking place with agencies, that will recognize some of the distinctiveness, but will also work towards the level of coordination that's going to be expected. When you ask then, should there be some impact, some sense of what the impact should be, we will certainly be looking for how to think about the entire enterprise and what's the role of the individual agencies within that. I'm saying this, expressing to you our desire to have any suggestions, any questions and ideas as we develop both the charter and the set of activities.
Well, will you be developing an annual plan then, or some sort of an organization chart that we can look at? I know that prior to this meeting, the ACC report had cataloged the way that money is being spent in the K through 12 education. That's very important. I think that's, in some sense, the relatively easy part of this task. We can find out where we are through a certain amount of research, and we can determine what our plans are. The real hard part is evaluating what we're going to get once we start doing it. I was appreciating Dr. Winterton's discussion of how some programs had worked, and they were exciting, and the kids got involved. It'd be nice to have that sort of thing, not codified, but in some sort of a description that people can refer to in a way that will be helpful. But then again, the question of evaluation, I think Dr. Valdez mentioned that we can evaluate programs after they're done. But the problem is that we need sort of a feedback mechanism so that when a program is in progress, we can tell if it's working or not. So the evaluation is really the most difficult aspect, in my opinion, here. So could we have a comment, Dr. Marrett?
Several comments. I'll try to keep them brief. One of the things that you also heard during the testimony is the imperative for enhanced research, STEM education research, understanding a lot more of what works, under what conditions, for whom, and through what processes. Since we know, we've got to enhance that a lot more, and I am very encouraged when I hear my colleagues indicate what that will mean. That will have to play into the plans for evaluation. So on the one hand, we will be proceeding, building on the knowledge that does exist about evaluation, having those conversations of what are the appropriate kinds of measures, of indicators, how do we have those that would be common enough across the agencies. We will do that, but I won't promise that we will have everything on an annual basis at the beginning, just because there are these very thorny but important questions about how do we build a knowledge base, the knowledge base that will be so important for the way the evaluation activities will have to take place.
Well, I like the sound of using the scientific method in evaluating this scientific education, but honestly, that is going to be our challenge, is how do we know when we're having success? How do we make sure that the program is organized? And I think it's going to be important to see that plan to move forward. Dr. Valdez, a question if I have time. I understand that you've been developing a strategic plan for the Department of Energy education programs to ensure that they align with STEM workforce needs for the future. Would you tell the subcommittee the process you underwent to determine those educational needs and how you use that information to create your strategic plan?
Yes. The strategic plan, as most strategic plans, are based on what our stakeholders think we should be doing and aligning that to the mission of the Department of Energy. So, for example, we had a series of 9 focus groups involving 110 stakeholders, everything from the educational community to corporate America to groups representing underrepresented populations, in a very structured way, talking about how the Department of Energy, which is a mission agency, could participate in STEM education and workforce development. And I think this gets to the heart of what this hearing is all about. Why would an agency like the Department of Energy be involved in this? And the reason is because we care about our future workforce. We support specific disciplines and specific areas of industrial competitiveness that are important to the nation. And as a result, we have to work with the educational community at all levels, not just K through 12, but undergraduate, postdoc, graduate school, and then continuing lifelong learning. So we developed a process where we brought in all members of those communities to help us rationalize the resources that we have within the Department of Energy to more effectively use them. And frankly, our most effective use is through the national laboratories. And you, Mr. Chairman, were at Sandia National Labs, and you know that these national laboratories are embedded in the communities. They work with local school districts. They are the experts. And so we deliver our products and services through them, and we try to align the strategic plan in a way that makes full and maximum use of our national laboratories.
Thank you, Dr. Valdez. The chair now recognizes Dr. Ehlers for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Dr. Fuchs, you mentioned as an old professor you felt compelled to use PowerPoints. Let me point out, as a younger professor, that I think you did the right thing. I've read a number of these articles about how terrible it is to use PowerPoints and we shouldn't use them so much, etc. I've decided all of those are written by people who don't know how to prepare good slides. Dr. Marrett, first question for you. You've described, you're planning to reconstitute the NTSC, the National Science Technology Council Subcommittee on Education and Workforce Development, for which I applaud you. It should never have been disbanded. You've described the necessary qualifications as knowledge and experience. Would it also be helpful for you in that process to ensure that a minimum level of experience, or maybe the better word is stature, within their agency, their seniority or whatever, be required so that you can ensure that the appropriate individuals will be at the NTSC's disposal through this means? And I think what I'm getting at. I have nothing against junior personnel; they usually have the best ideas. But you need some upper-level people there to really make sure that this gets carried out, and that when someone on your subcommittee goes back home and says, well, we really should do this, that you don't have some other person there who frowns and says, well, we really don't have the money in the budget. What's your response?
My response is that the way this is being set up is through the Committee on Science. The Committee on Science consists of the principals from the agencies. Hence, when we've asked for their nominees, the assumption is that whatever the level of the person, that person will have direct access to the top of the agency. You're quite right that it will be very important that there will be access to the centers of communication, to funding, but this is what we anticipate the process should help enhance that.
Okay, I hope you're right. You may want to build something into the structure to ensure that. Next question. I know what the ranking of the budgets of the agencies are. Obviously, Dr. Fuchs, you have the richest agency, and then we go down to NASA, then Energy, and then finally NSF. And we could have lots of arguments of how it should be. But I'm curious how much is spent on education in each of your agencies. And we'll go right to left in this, Dr. Fuchs. What does NIH spend on these educational issues? What is your budget?
I believe we submitted to the ACC around $800 million worth of activity. And that would have been in a year when our total budget was about $28 billion.
Yeah, okay.
The vast majority, 95% of that, was actually graduate, postgraduate activity.
Okay, and how much, any estimate how much is K-12?
We've submitted $36 million worth of K-12 activities and about $6 million worth of informal education.
Okay. Mr. Valdez.
My office has a budget of $8 million per year. Through appropriated funds, we think the department spends about $20 to $25 million per year on educational activities. And then through the national laboratories, both through overhead, other kinds of activities, partnerships with industry and other groups, there's probably about another $30 million that is spent by the national laboratories. That's so a total of about $50 to $60 million.
Okay. And Dr. Winterton, I know NASA spends a huge amount of money in educational activities. What is yours?
Well, we do spend on education in various places within NASA. So within the Office of Education, we plan on spending about $153 million. And we also have each of our 4 mission directorates who also invest in education because it ties, again, directly back to their missions.
Right.
So for the science mission, it's about $72 million. For explorations, 4.8, aeronautics, 2.8, and our space operation mission directorate sends and supports activities directly at the centers. So if you want those specifics, I can provide that as well.
I think this gives me a general idea. And finally, Dr. Marrett, what is...
Yes, for NSF, across the board, it's nearly $1 billion. But this includes what's spent inside the Directorate for Education and Human Resources as well as outside. So the Directorate itself has a budget of just over $700 million. But this is where I would again indicate that there are efforts. Every part of the foundation has education, outreach, public service activities that relate to education, and so it comes to about nearly $1 billion.
Okay, that's very helpful. It gives me some perspective, and I may have to speak to Mr. Bodman or Dr. Orbach about bumping up your your budget, Mr. Valdez. I really appreciate what you've done. I've encountered in my experience in the schools, the K-12 schools, products of what you've done, and I think it's outstanding. The one part that bothers me, which I've tried to correct legislatively, but so far I've not had enough support, is the inability of teachers to locate what they may want or need at a particular time. And so what I have advocated was a clearinghouse where all the programs that you have available for schools would be listed, and this would be on a website, and any teacher who wanted to could access that if they had a particular unit they were working on and wanted to just look at what was available. So that teacher could go on the website, type that in, the units would be displayed, and I really advocate an Amazon.com type of approach where teachers who have used something would then evaluate and just write a short value to statement, give a ranking from 1 to 4, and this would be very useful. I hope that we can get that passed, because I think it would be immensely useful to the teachers and would give much greater exposure to what you have done, what you have. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Ehlers. The chair now recognizes my good friend and mentor from Illinois, Mr. Lipinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank all the witnesses for their testimony today and the work that they're doing. I don't know if there's anything really more important in ensuring America's future than to improve our STEM education. I think it is very, very critical for our country. I have a degree in mechanical engineering, and I always point to, as many people have heard this now, my physics teacher and was a junior in high school, who really is the one who inspired me to go ahead and go to college and major in mechanical engineering. Really got me interested and excited in studying engineering. A couple of things that I wanted to ask about. First, Dr. Marrett, the new NSTC Subcommittee on STEM Education is a subcommittee of the NSTC Committee on Science. Do you think that this is a sufficiently high-level organization to get the agency's attention, or do you think there should be something higher level than that?
I'm quite willing to try it at the level where it is. There was, in fact, the committee did exist. The charter expired in last December, and so it's not as if this is a brand new activity. And my colleagues who were involved before will know that we have some items that should come onto that agenda. I know there's been this question of what should be the level. I think that we can be effective when there is a level of conversation that's needed, the planning, wherever, as long as Chairman McNerney indicated, there is the strong connection to the top of agencies and to the conversations that must take place across and within agencies. But I'm not bothered by the fact that this is being structured as a subcommittee of the Committee of Science.
Now, back in November, I spoke to National Science Board. They're in Chicago meeting talking about STEM ed, and right now we're awaiting their report, recommendation on what to do on STEM ed. I understand it's been delayed now until August. Dr. Marrett, or if any other witnesses do you have any ideas about what is going to be coming out of this, or where you see this going?
Well, let me first thank you very much for the presentation that you made, and in fact I heard that it was an impressive set of comments that you gave. The National Science Board Committee is in the process of redrafting the report. that's why I'm not sure my colleagues have seen what is still, for now, an internal document for the National Science Board. Thus, it would be difficult for me to describe where everything is likely to lead, except that I would say it again is likely to reinforce the imperative for coordinated efforts, for heightened attention for what must take place. So to that extent, I see it as responding to and helping to clarify many of the issues this committee has dealt with, as well as the several reports that people have referred to.
Well, I'm very much looking forward to seeing that, as I know all of us are. In my last bit of time here, I wanted to ask Mr. Valdez about some of the programs that are going on with the DOE labs in helping with STEM ed. I've talked to Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago, who is working, has more plans to work with Argonne National Lab to try to bring students down to the museum to really get them interested, excited about these various areas. Now, a couple of things that you talked about in your testimony. First, you describe activities that support K-12 teachers who are involved in research activities at the national labs. Has there been an evaluation that DOE has done about the effectiveness of doing this?
We have not done a specific evaluation of that program. It's a relatively new program. It's a three-year program that the first cadre of teachers completed their participation in the program just this past summer. And we have been developing the evaluation techniques that will enable us to then track what happens to them after they finish the program and what they've learned through the program. So it's too soon to say whether or not we have evaluated it right.
Well, I definitely want to support that. I think that's something we should be doing more of. And also, in addition, I think something you talked about was at Sandia National Lab. If the chair will indulge me to ask one last question here. It's Sandia National Lab. You mentioned how there's a pilot program for the administration's Adjunct Teacher Core initiative. Can you explain how this works?
Well, the Adjunct Teacher Core is has a goal of putting 30,000 adjunct teachers into classrooms by the year 2012 or 2013. I forget which one. And Department of Education came to the Department of Energy and said, we don't have the ability to recruit adjunct teachers the way that you do, because adjunct teachers would come from industry, national laboratories, working scientists, retired scientists. And so we were very excited about working with them, and Sandia stepped up to the plate and decided they would pilot the concept. And so over the next fiscal year, we're going to take a look at what Sandia does and then see if we can model this to the other 17 national laboratories in the DOE system. I think that illustrates what we do at the Department of Energy. We design programs nationally, but we implement them locally through the national laboratories and through our other partners. And if you do that, even though our budget is small, Mr. Ehlers, and I do appreciate your voice of support for this, the fact of the matter is we reach a lot of people. Through our national laboratories, we touch 250,000 K through 12 students every year and 19,000 K through 12 educators, because they use the money that we have at Department of Energy headquarters as seed money to then go out and work with industry, local school districts, and everybody else to implement the programs. And it's a very effective model and one that I think could be useful for other federal agencies.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lipinski. I believe the committee was interested in another round of questions, so I will recognize myself for another 5 minutes. Dr. Marrett, will the subcommittee develop and maintain a catalog of the federal STEM education programs as the ACC did? I think that's important, and at least having a quantifiable, early quantifiable way to understand the connection and how money is being spent, whether there's overlap, waste, and so on?
Because the committee is still being put together, I have to hesitate to answer some questions about what the committee will do, but this one I can be confident about, because we've already had the conversations that said, yes, the ACC report had, of course, had recommended this kind of continued compendium of programs, and that will be done. So that part is going to certainly be continued as related to the ACC process. I think it is likely, too, that we will come back to an issue that had been on the table earlier, and that's trying to understand what the very concepts mean in the programs. As my colleague Dr. Fuchs has said, that sometimes the term that's used to describe a program need not mean the same thing from one place to another. So as we try to develop a useful compendium of what takes place, that will mean looking very much at how the programs are defined to develop something that will be across the agencies too on that front. But yes, we will be a source of trying to provide that information about what takes place.
What about priorities? How are we going to go ahead, or how is the committee going to go ahead and determine what the priorities are in terms of resource usage?
I am a bit hesitant to answer that one on behalf of all of my colleagues from the committee yet to be established. I think I would say with some level of confidence, we certainly will be looking at matters of priorities, paying attention to a lot of the information that's already around about what the nation's needs are for now and into the future. This cannot be just looking at what might have been appropriate some 20 years ago, but exactly how those will evolve is to be determined through a process that we intend to be as engaging and engaged as possible. For that, I would say we would welcome any observations you might have.
Well, it was interesting to hear Dr. Winterton's testimony, because she was talking about inspiring kids, and that's critically important, because no matter how much resource we offer, if the generation doesn't accept the offer and get engaged in the process, then we're not going to get as far as we need to get. And I see some of our national challenges as being a tool for getting kids engaged. The threat of global warming, for example, a great national and international threat that can not only show a challenge in terms of risk and the fear that might bring, but also the opportunity for intellectual achievement, for financial success, and so on. So some of these great national challenges ought to be involved in some way if we can get that as a part of the program. I don't know exactly how, but perhaps Dr. Valdez, you have, or Dr. Winterton have a comment on that?
Especially as we have the opportunity to engage faculty and students directly with our scientists, our science missions, or space exploration, so students see the real-world application. And we provide mentorship, so even in high school, students are working at Goddard Space Flight Center and actually doing research. So I think it's that really understanding. You really have to be very good, not only when you work in our labs, but when you're working in the International Space Station with international colleagues, that they really apply themselves in their math and their science classes, but they start seeing a career for them within the aerospace industry and understand that it's a great opportunity, but they see the kind of skills they need and the competencies to be there.
I'm a big fan of prioritizing things, and I think you need to go back to what are the core capabilities and the core missions of the federal agencies. And in the case of the federal mission agencies, I think it really comes down to two things. First, we need to be supportive of the workforce and the missions that we have been entrusted to us by the Congress and by the U.S. taxpayer. And so for the Department of Energy, it's support for energy, environment, national security, and basic discovery science. And that helps inform what kinds of programs we should have for STEM education and STEM workforce. And then we have a larger responsibility through the American Competitiveness Initiative to support STEM education and literacy in general. And I think this is where your notion, Mr. Chairman, of having students become excited about science plays in. And agencies are uniquely placed to have students become excited, whether it's by going to a DOE national laboratory and seeing the Advanced Photon Source in action, or riding a National Oceanographic Atmospheric Administration ship, an Antarctic ship. I mean, there are ways that we can do this, but we need to set those priorities and rationalize the resources in the appropriate way.
Well, I agree with the idea, but that only reaches a fairly small segment of the population. I mean, in terms of children in inner city schools, I mean, they're not going to get out to the labs. We need to find a way to reach out and show them the national need, the national priority, and the need for them to get engaged for our nation's future. And that's something that the committee might consider in its future debates.
Well, I would say that the committee will need to look at a number of options, because what's also been represented a bit here, and even more so with some of our agencies not at the table, is that we work to enhance the level of excitement, the motivation, through a number of informal processes, through the activities with Boy Scouts, for example, with community groups. One is not constrained to the very formal kinds of settings. And that's where we are also very interested in what's appropriate for the other kinds of settings, because we do not intend to leave behind segments of the population we know that must be important for where the nation moves.
Well, my time has expired. I'm going to recognize Mr. Ehlers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me just make a comment, Mr. Chairman. I've been through many hearings over the years, and I've been working on improving math science education in the K-12 system for close to 50 years now, but especially in the last 14 in the Congress. This is the biggest and best audience we've ever had for this. So I think, Mr. Chairman, we're finally getting the word out, and people are interested in the topic. I find that very heartening. I know that the National Science Foundation requires education and public outreach as part of research proposals that are submitted. Is that common in your other agencies as well? When investigators submit a request for proposal, do they have to also include a statement about the educational aspects that will come out of that?
It's not a feature in the NIH. It was considered for a while back in the 1990s under the previous director, and the decision was not to make that similar requirement.
Okay. Mr.
So
Valdez?
we don't have that.
No, it's not part of the Department of Energy's grant programs.
Okay. And Dr. Winterton?
Is part of our science mission directorate, so each of their principal investigators with their science missions are required to do an education public outreach plan and implement that. And
of the two agencies that do this, is there the proposal that of how they're going to implement that education and outreach, is that considered in deciding whether or not to give the grant, or is that just sort of an automatic add-on?
No, for NSF, it is critical for what takes place, because we've got the criteria of intellectual merit and the broadening of participation. And in that context of broadening of participation, this is where generally the outreach efforts, the education activities are to be undertaken. Those then become critical in the decisions made about the awarding of grants. We're at this process trying to think of some ways to make sure that we can evaluate effectively the outcomes from those efforts.
Okay, so if someone submits a proposal for an experiment to measure Einstein's effect in general relativity, that the educational part is considered as well as the scientific part. Is that true in NASA also, Dr. Winterton?
It is a really critical part of their plan, and we work closely and offer our assistance in the Office of Education to assist in educational outreach and dissemination of those opportunities as well.
Okay, and I would just encourage Energy and NIH to consider doing the same thing. It's a very useful thing. I also just, Dr. Winterton, you mentioned something about a mathematical exercise relating to flying. Do you use flight simulators at all in your programs with the schools?
We do have
commercially available flight simulators.
We provide those opportunities through our centers. Now, the type of simulation the students were doing, I know you're a budding pilot and you might want to try this simulator to make sure we're getting the right mission control experts.
I've already flown a shuttle. And
is a computer-based simulation, so that part is available in any school.
Yeah.
So we like that combination of affordable, readily is available, but you can also go to a center to do those simulations as well. And I think through some of our university and our space grants, there certainly is another opportunity to provide that in a broader sense.
Okay, and I can't give commercials, but I'm fascinated with the potentials of the X-plane program because it actually allows students to construct their own airplane. And you have to be fairly sophisticated, at least junior high, perhaps higher. But it's an incredibly good educational experience. The program is $50 or something like that. So any school could afford to have that. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This has been an excellent hearing. The only missing component, and I don't want to criticize, even though I should since I'm part of the minority and that's our job. But there's one other agency that spends a huge amount of money on K-12 education. That's the Defense Department. It's a smaller fraction of their budget than any of these agencies. But we might want to hear from them sometime, too, about what they are doing. And they, incidentally, one plus factor of the Defense Department is their Army schools, which are located around the world. I shouldn't say Army. The schools are for their employees' children's. Consistently rank higher than the average American school, particularly in the science and technology. And also often equal the record of the countries that they are in. So obviously the Defense Department is doing something right in their schools, and we might be interested in talking to them about that sometime. With that, I will conclude, and thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for having this hearing.
Well, the Chair thanks the Ranking Member for his thoughtful comments, and I think that's something that we would want to move forward with. And before we're closing, I'd like to thank the witnesses for, again, spending their afternoon, and also the members of the audience. It's a nice day out there, so it's appreciated that you would come in here to hear our testimony today. And the record will remain open for additional questions that subcommittee members may ask of the witnesses, so be prepared for that. The witnesses are excused and the hearing is now adjourned.